reason my attachments aren't coming in now.
Okay.
Okay, we're called to the order of the Parks Committee meeting on 9/27/23, Wednesday. Start with roll call. Alder Eck,
Here?
Alder Weary is excused, and Alder Stoyer is present. Can I have an approval on the agenda?
Move.
Oh, go ahead.
Motion approved.
Second?
All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed, nay. Okay, aye. How about the approval of the minutes?
Motion to approve.
Second?
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, we'll move on to regular business. Number one, consideration with possible action on accepting a grant award from the Environmental Protection Agency for $275,000 to fund the necessary engineering for habitat restoration project at Joliet Park, and to approve entering into a contract with the
Here's what I
Wisconsin
found.
Department of Natural Resources to jointly execute the terms of the grant funding.
So in the 1980s, the lower Green Bay and a portion of the Fox River were listed as one of the 43 Great Lakes Area of Concern. So it's defined as an AOC, which means Area of Concern. There are 4 other area of concerns within the state of Wisconsin. So it's not a good listing to be associated with. It means that there's problems with the waterway and the habitat in that area. So the region was designated as an AOC due to contaminated sediment, poor water quality, and loss of habitat. So since then, the DNR has been developing a plan to take action to try to eliminate the AOC designation for the lower Green Bay and Fox River area. So a few years ago, the DNR created a task force which was made up of stakeholders throughout the region to select projects that would have the biggest impact from a habitat improvement standpoint. And Joliet Park was represented one of those 12 selected management projects that were recommended by the committee. Now, the official name of the committee was the Lower Green Bay and Fox River AOC Fish and Wildlife Habitat and Populous Technical Subcommittee. So it's a long name.
Okay.
But ultimately, it was made up of all of the professionals in the industry as it relates to habitat improvement. So it's habitat within the waterway, it's shoreland habitat, it's U.S. Fish and Wildlife was in there, all of the representative agencies or communities were part of that subcommittee. I was officially on that subcommittee too, where we looked at various potential projects throughout the region. And like I said, we selected the top 12 projects throughout the region that would have the biggest impact to improve habitat to help eliminate that AOC designation. So there were only 2 other projects besides Joliet Park that were selected within the city of Green Bay. One of those was Tank Farm Marsh, which is managed by Public Works, and then the other one is the Wildlife Sanctuary. Tank Farm Marsh has already been tackled as a project, and that went through INS for approval a year or 2 ago. They're well underway with the planning of that project. And the Wildlife Sanctuary, will be having more discussions on that about a year from now. So they can only do so many projects for this funding. In addition, one other project that I talked to you about a few months ago was the National Railroad Museum. So they did a large habitat project also that was through this same program and through this same funding source. And we gave approval to the village of Ashwaubenon to proceed with their project because that is on city land. The objective of the project that we're bringing forward today at Joliet Park is to improve both the water and upland habitat that was lost throughout the years. So the habitat enhancements proposed specifically for Joliet Park would be to improve the stone spawning reef that is currently in the waterway. That spawning reef was built in about the year 2000, early 2000. And since then, just through the various wave actions, it's kind of, it needs some improvement. So it's not as effective as it was when it was first installed. And then in addition, there's a desire to remove all the invasive species upland, or the majority of them, and then to replace it with natural habitat. And the native plantings would be incorporated into the design to improve the biodiversity and the habitat of the upper habitat outside of the water. And then finally, we would use this funding to improve the erosion that has happened throughout the up and down the shoreline of the entire park. So when we had high water conditions, there was extensive erosion along the bank of that park. So if we do approve this grant funding, it will go towards hiring a consultant to do all of the detailed engineering work associated with this project, and then to create bid-ready construction documents. So this grant will not fund any construction-related activities. All of that will be done after we decide what we want to do with the site. So right now, we just conceptually kind of have a game plan of what the DNR and the subcommittee would recommend for potential improvements to Joliet Park, but we have no official engineering documents behind it. So the grant was applied through the city, a joint effort through the city and the DNR, and we applied for grant funding through the EPA, and it's part of the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative is where this funding will go from. And we were just recently notified that the city was awarded a grant in the amount of $275,000 to go towards this engineering work. So if we do accept the grant, a couple of things need to happen. One is we would have to officially accept the grant as part of this committee and the city council. That is a city policy, is that the council gets to weigh in on accepting any grant that is awarded. And then secondly, because this is a joint effort with the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources, we have to enter into an agreement with them to actually figure out a joint effort and put on paper how we're going to jointly administer this grant. What I'm looking for approval today is to accept the grant and to approve entering into an agreement with the Wisconsin DNR to jointly administer the grant. I would recommend that we make it contingent upon the law department review and approval of the grant contracts, because they haven't had a chance to weigh in on the grant contracts. But it's pretty standard language for any grants that we apply. We don't think that there's going to be a lot of back and forth between the two entities. But I just think that it would be wise to just put that motion in there if you decide to award the grant. I do see that there are several people on the Zoom call who might be interested in weighing in on this discussion. And so I don't know, Alder Grant is on, if you want to just open it to her, but I know that there's at least one other person from the Neighborhood Association who is on the Zoom meeting also.
Okay, why don't we,
Yeah, I make a motion.
Do we make a motion to open up?
well, we don't have to open the floor to hear from Alder Grant.
No, we
Right.
don't.
So if
We
we
wanna
want to
hear
hear
that
from her,
first?
then I would prefer, I would like to start there. That's what I'm going to ask.
Alder Grant, are you there?
I am, thank you.
Would you rather start the conversation or end it?
Yeah, I don't have a ton of questions, more here to observe. I do have one question though, Director Ditch, are you aware of any grants that are available that should we move forward with any of the plan that would qualify as far as actually then constructing of the recommendations?
Yeah, so like I said, this funding for this engineering grant is through the EPA's Great Lakes Restoration Initiative. There is also significant funding available for these AOC projects for construction. So I'm going to use Tank Farm Marsh as an example. They first received an engineering grant similar to the one that we're proposing for Joliet Park, and then a year later, after it was designed, they received a construction grant through the EPA through the same funding source. So we are hopeful that we will receive a similar construction grant from the EPA and fund that 100% in its entirety. So right now, all of this work that we're proposing would be no city funding. We're hoping to get it all funded through that Great Lakes Initiative program. Now, the one thing that I do want to mention is the grant only covers habitat work. It does not cover anything such as trails or improvements to the parking lot or adding any other feature that the city might want to do there. And, what that is, I don't know offhand, because we're hoping the consultant will help us figure that out. One thing that is built into this grant funding also is neighborhood engagement, which I'll be talking in the next agenda item, because we're in the next agenda item, I'm seeking approval to hire a consultant to actually implement this. And so I'll talk more about the public engagement as part of that phase of it, and what the contractor or the selected consultant would be responsible to do in relation to public engagement. But we do want to engage the neighborhood. We do want them to be a part of this process of figuring out what Joliet is going to become as far as the habitat goes, and also weigh into any other ideas for potential improvements to the site. But this funding will only go towards habitat improvements, and that's it. If there's a desire to do any other physical improvements to the site, we would either have to seek out other grant opportunities, such as through the DNR stewardship program, or the city would have to bond for those improvements. But like I said, this grant has nothing to do with those improvements, and through the public engagement process, we'll figure out what other demands are out there for that park.
Okay, can I ask?
Yep, and I'm aware of that. I guess I just more wanted to make sure, because what I sometimes worry is we do these consulting firms and then it's a large cost to the taxpayer, as a result. So that's why I was curious if there's other grants. And is Joliet Park, was that approved as a passive park of Green Bay?
I think it was. I can't remember specifically. I'd have to go back and check our outdoor recreation and open space plan to tell you a definite answer. I think it was considered a natural area in that plan, but I'm just going off of memory. And there's a possibility it was designated as a neighborhood park, but I don't think that that's likely.
Okay, and if it is in fact a passive park, are there restrictions on things that we can and can't disrupt?
No, that would just be a city designation, and there are no restrictions associated with that designation. So you can still develop it with active items if the city so chooses to, because there are no restrictions by ordinance, even if it's considered a natural area. So like, for example, Bear Creek Greenway, we consider that a natural area, but there's a lot of other active activities within that greenway that we allow as a city. Not saying that we would promote that or even want that at Joliet Park. I'm just using that as an example that there are no restrictions, even if it's considered a natural area.
Okay, sounds good. That's all my questions. So yeah, I know, there is a resident that would like to, I believe, speak.
Can I ask her a question?
Go ahead.
Okay, Alder Grant, do you have thoughts on this one way or the other, positive, negative?
Not really yet. Again, I would like to kind of hear from the public, but
Okay.
I think as long as, and Director Ditchite and I did talk about this today about hosting a neighborhood meeting to gather public input once the plan is together to gauge what the residents want. I think at this point, there really isn't a ton of action steps on our end, which I'm okay with. I think it's worth hearing out how we can improve this park, especially with it being a natural habitat for, a lot of very unique animals out here. I mean, we see hawks, we see eagles, we see a lot of cool things. So if there's anything we can do to keep them here, I think that's very important. So I don't believe it hurts to hear what they have to say, especially if there's a grant for it.
Thank you. Make a motion to open the floor.
I'll second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Have someone on Zoom that wants to speak?
So if you do want to speak, just unmute yourself, and then please give your name and address for our records. Yes.
My name is Joe Morgan. I'm president of Nicolay Drive Neighborhood Association. I don't know where this is going to go, but I will tell you, the city council, maybe it was 6 or 7 years ago, voted this park to be a passive park. We presented a petition signed by, I think, 265 people on Nicolay Drive asking to keep this a passive park because of the natural area, the animals and the eagles that are up in the trees. So this was indeed declared a passive park. That's the only thing I can offer to you right now.
Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Morgan?
Mr. Morgan, I'm Alder Stoyer. I was at those meetings, and it was quite lengthy. You know, there was a lot of talk about keeping a natural area. Do you have concerns that if this goes through, that there will be more human activity there with trails and parking lot? I know there's one now, but you know, just improvements. Do you feel that that will affect the passive nature of Joliet Park?
I'm not competent to comment on that, but Ganga Neer, a professor at UWGB, who was recognized worldwide with death, said this property should not be touched. It should stay in its natural area. Now, you know, what else can be done with the property? It's very slopey. It's if you go in there and mess with the vegetation, you may create a hazard to the road. I can't discuss that, but I can just say we gave you a petition signed by 265 neighbors, wanted it to remain a passive park. The city council voted for that. The park director at the time, I don't remember her name, she was in full agreement with this.
Right, Donnie Kramer.
Yes.
Okay, that's all I have right now.
No, I can see that the shoreline has eroded. I think eventually you're going to have to do something with that shoreline property, or you're going to get more erosion. And when they put the sewer line up Church Road, the present city engineer at that time dumped all of the clay and the rock fill in there. He had a regular road going right down the shoreline. That's all washed away. So you can't just put fill down there. If you're going to do something to protect the shore, be prepared to put some big rocks down there.
Okay, thank you. I don't know if there's somebody else.
Anybody else on Zoom that would like to speak? No? Okay.
Should
Make a
we
motion to close the floor?
I'll make a motion to close the floor.
All those in
Second.
favor say aye.
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 Little conversation.
I've got questions too. So,
Okay, go ahead,
Well, I
Mr.
mean-
Stoyer.
okay. All right, so there's a couple things, Director. The grant award is for $275,000. So I was looking at agenda items 1 and 2, and I know we haven't talked about 2 yet, but is agenda 1 item needed for number 2 to happen? Can we talk about that now or wait till the next agenda item?
We can talk about it because they are somewhat related.
Okay.
If you don't approve item 1, you cannot approve item 2.
Okay, that's
because we
basically
are
what else.
using the grant funding
Right.
to pay for item 2.
Okay,
Oh, okay.
then I got a couple more.
Oh, okay.
All right, so what other monies are needed to complete this project? Is that too early to say?
It's too early to say. I mean, ultimately, it'd be construction money to do habitat improvements. Until the consultant defines what those habitat improvements are, it'd be a shot in the dark for me to tell you what that restoration dollar amount is going to be. But it would be, you know, much more significant than what it is for the engineering fees. So you're talking, you know, $1 million plus.
I think that's one of the difficult things looking at a project like this. You know, normally when you see grants, you go, oh, wow, that's a great
Yeah, that's
idea.
great.
Let's bring it in. But then again, you have to figure out, okay, what's the long-term effect here? How much more is needed? Is it gonna have to be on the tax dollar or what have you, or in the budget, or is it spoken for, those type of things. So that's just one concern. I'm generally in favor of a lot of this. You know, I'm looking at the period of agreement between the DNR and Green Bay. It goes till March 1st of 2025. Have you felt or seen any other time where what are the consequences if something like this isn't met? Have we had that issue much in the past?
Whenever we run into a timing issue with certain grants and not fulfilling them in the terms of the agreement, oftentimes we ask for extensions to the grants. Many times those grants are extended for a period of time, depending on the reasons behind it and why we're asking for the extension. I will tell you that there is a desire by the city and the DNR to initiate this project, get the engineering going as quickly as possible so that we can start looking at grant funding to do the habitat improvements in the very near future. So I'm pretty confident that we'll be able to meet the terms of the agreement and the grant contracts.
I just have one more. So you look at the map, which I like, I love maps. You got the area shown along the shorelines and the Fox River of the project location, and Joliet is a small portion of that, but it falls within that area. So when this was done 7 or 8 years ago, as Mr. Morgan mentioned, you know, when they had that, the citizens talk about keeping it as a passive park, does the fact that the DNR now and the city to a degree, are they looking to say, well, wait a minute, this is above and beyond possibly just that one particular area? We're looking at a kind of a regional piece here, and that it's important that we kind of keep in step with everything else that's in that area.
And so obviously when we're working with the DNR, they're very aware of that area of concern, what the desire is. I think in future years, we'll continue those discussions with the DNR on how can we improve other areas within the AOC. But for the specifics of this grant, it's only going to look at Joliet Park. That is the limits of what the grant will cover.
Okay, that's all. Thank you. That's all I have for now.
Alder?
Okay, so by approving this possible grant, that really isn't making any changes as far as the passive park part of it. It sounded like you said it wasn't a passive park, but is it a passive park or not?
I mean, it's considered a passive park.
Okay.
I mean, all it is a natural area right now. And yeah, I was very involved with those discussions 6-7 years ago. I'm very familiar with the concerns that were brought up then. We have no intentions to change the use of the park, just to improve the habitat. Now, obviously, when we have these neighborhood discussions, we'd like to hear from the neighbors again. I mean, 6-7 years have passed. What are the desires? Is there a desire to, add trails there? Is there a desire to add a canoe kayak launch? Is there a desire to pave the parking lot? Those are things that we're going to talk about as part of the neighborhood engagement, but those are also things that this grant has nothing to do with.
Right.
So even if it's it's always good to get that input at the time of a public meeting so that we can plan accordingly. Maybe nothing else changes other than the habitat, and if that's all that happens as part of this process, then we'll just move forward with that. And I'd be fine with that if that is the end recommendation. Like I said, this is just a habitat improvement grant, and this isn't even going to actually implement it. It's just for engineering purposes.
Yeah, but there's a difference between the grant amount and then the amount that number 2 is asking for.
Correct, and the reason the difference is there is in case there's a change in scope of work during the engineering phase, then there's a little bit of extra funding available if additional studies are necessary that weren't originally envisioned in the original scope of work.
Okay, so those are like two different issues as far as the passive park part. Okay.
And I just have a couple comments. I've driven past that for many years. It gets used pretty often. I know a lot of the Hmong people like to go down there and fish, and people fish off the shore, and it's always been a good fishery along that area. And I know, I think the city maintains that. The INS here. So garbage cans, and is there a street light there? I think there is, or there isn't, or it's kind of up on the road there?
I think that there's one street light in close
Yeah.
proximity, but this is considered a park, so Parks maintains it
Yeah, okay. And plows it and everything in the winter?
if needed, yeah.
Okay, I mean, it does get used quite often, the way it sits. I find that the engineering fees on here seem to be rather absorbent to the grant. I'm a little concerned about that and the overall cost of this project and what it's gonna cost the city down the road. Granted, we're all for everything. If it gets granted all the way along, we'll change it to Grant Park, but, you know, I think there's a lot of history with Red Banks and everything along here. I mean, it's kind of where, if you look into that project, and this is kind of probably a fall off of that from many, many, many years ago when Green Bay was founded. And I have that story that someone gave me, so it's pretty interesting. And I think this is just like a smaller part of the Red Banks area. But all of that up into that area is quite unique, just like the West Shore area and the reconstruction of all the islands. I don't know if it's, you know, that extensive of a project there. I mean, you used to be able to smelt fish down there when you were a kid. But we don't have that habitat anymore, and I don't think we'll ever have it back. But we have a good walleye as a sport fisherman and hunter. You know, there's plenty of boats out there all the time, and, you know, it's not too far out. And I know they catch walleyes off the shore there. So I'm all for improving it, as long as it doesn't end up to be a kind of a hangout, more of type of a place that would kind of be the deterrent on, along with some of the other parks that seem to be going on lately, that being a little bit out of town, I have a concern about that part of it, you know, people, homeless people sleeping in their cars in the parks and stuff, so that's my biggest concern. Improving it, is that gonna help or hurt it? Sounds like it can only help it, time will tell. So I'd be looking, are we ready to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to, I guess, with the caveat of having the legal department look at it.
Yeah, so I would approve it contingent upon the law department review and approval of the contract.
That's my
So
motion.
accept the grant keyword.
Yeah,
And I will second it.
All
that's
those-
in there, right, accepting the grant?
Yes.
Yes.
All those in favor say aye.
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 All those in favor nay. All right, we'll move on to number 2, since we can do that. Consideration with possible action on hiring Robert E. Lee Associates Incorporated for the sum of $229,316.40 to complete the necessary engineering for habitat restoration project at Joliet Park.
So as I mentioned during the last agenda item, this is associated with the grant funding. If we hire this consultant, it would be 100% funded through the grant that you just approved. And there is a little bit of a buffer if the scope of work changes during the engineering phase. 3 consultants bid on this project or submitted proposals. We're proposing to give it to the lowest bid, who also received the highest score when we ranked and scored the 3 proposals. So there was a total of 400 points max in the scoring proposal. Robert E. Lee scored 346 out of the 400 points. We worked with them on numerous occasions for various projects. They're a qualified firm. We have no concerns with them being capable of doing the appropriate engineering here. I know the comment or the question came up as far as, you know, what's making this such a high cost comparatively, to other projects that we consult with or hiring an engineering consultant for. The reason is because there is extensive engineering studies that have to be done in conjunction with this. So I've included all of that in the agenda packet. You can see the scope of work of what they're providing, but it's everything from wetland delineation to survey work, to a bathymetric study, which is kind of determining what's the depths of the waterway out 150 feet from the shoreline. figuring out, doing some analysis on wave action, doing some analysis on the reef structure that was built in 2000, what's damaged, what needs to be improved. When you get to the shoreline improvements, they have to do kind of an analysis on the erosion that's occurred. They have to do a habitat study to see what habitat is currently there. Then they have to make recommendations on what sort of habitat do we want to actually encourage out there. And then how to specifically design the habitat improvements to actually enhance for those specific animals and vegetation that we're trying to encourage in that space. And then finally, public engagement is part of this. They have a neighborhood public engagement meeting scheduled in there, where we will bring preliminary concepts of what the habitat could look like to the neighborhood. We'll do it as part of a neighborhood association meeting. We'll invite other people who live in close proximity to the park to that meeting, and we'll get the public input. Once that's done, then final engineering needs to be done, and that is construction-ready documents. So this is so that we can actually bid out the project to a contractor at a later date. In addition, they were required to do all the permitting associated with this. When you're looking at permitting for anything within the waterway, it's fairly extensive, and you have to do all of these other engineering studies in conjunction with the permitting. So although it sounds like a very small project, there's a lot of engineering data that has to be pulled together in order to get the permits to actually build it. So that's why the fee is so high, because there's a lot of studies that go behind it.
Okay.
So, oh,
Just a question. So at some point, we're going to interject the citizens of the area, the neighborhood into this.
Yes.
What if we just get the 260-some people that's saying, we don't want it? Then what happens to this whole project?
Well, then what would happen with the
Would
project?
it come back, excuse me, then my question would be, would it come back to the committee/council then for a final approval?
Yeah, at that point, we would have those discussions with the DNR. I mean, the DNR will be part of these public input sessions, and they'll hear the information that comes out of that meeting. At that point, we would have to decide as a city and the DNR, because we'll be in an agreement with them, do we finish out the terms of the contract and just put the engineering study on the shelf, or do we end it right there and just pay the consultant for the work that they did up to that point? And then obviously we'd have to talk to the EPA with the grant funding. I will tell you that I was involved with all of those meetings previously, and the biggest, one of the biggest things that came out of all of those meetings is everybody wanted it to remain natural. Now, there was a lot of debate and discussion of what that meant and what that was going to look like, but I think everybody was supportive of improving habitat. Now, we just didn't have the engineering to back it up previously, and so hopefully with hiring this engineering consultant, we'll be able to do this in a manner that really will, I'm confident we can, get most or all of the people on board that this is a good approach to Joliet Park instead of just leaving it how it currently is. Because as was mentioned in the public comments in the last section, at a minimum, we're going to have to address the erosion that's happening out there. It's pretty extensive with the high water. We're going to have to do something, and if nothing else, this grant funding will help to alleviate or kind of stop the progression of the erosion that's happening out there. So I'm hopeful that it won't come to that, but those would be the steps that we would have to go through if it does come to that point.
May I comment?
We would have to open the floor in just a few minutes.
yeah, can I just say something?
Yes, Alder.
Thanks, Chair.
Story.
Director, I was, with these engineering studies, and I know, at first it's like, okay, I understand you have to pay a bit for engineering studies, and there's a lot of different angles here. How long are these studies good for, in terms of, things change every year? Were there other studies or anything done in the past that we can still draw upon? Or does it happen like after a year or two, that's not relevant anymore, we have to do another study?
I think in general, the studies for this particular site would last for quite a while. The only thing that might change in a very short duration of time would be the amount of erosion that's occurring, or possibly what the wave action is doing to kind of the reef habitat, the fish species habitat that's already in the water. So that might change over time. But other than that, I mean, the upland species that are there have been there for many years. They're all, the majority of them are invasive or aggressive species. And I wouldn't anticipate that would drastically change. What does change if you don't implement things in a timely manner is the permitting that's associated with it. Usually when you get a permit, especially for anything within the waterway, that permit is usually good for maybe a 2-year timeline. Depends on the permit, they're all different. But after 2 years or so, that permit would expire and you have to reapply, and you might have to redo some engineering studies in order to pull a new permit down the road.
Well, that makes sense. I just thought I'd double check on that.
Alderette?
Okay, so I feel like we kind of have two discussions going. So neighborhood, the gentleman that, and he wants to speak, is concerned about future improvements in a way, I think, more like trails or, I don't know, playground equipment or whatever it might be, versus what the DNR is looking to do is look at the habitat and improvement and far as the erosion, things like that, right? So I would think that would go along with what the neighbors and the petition showed is they wanted to stay natural. So what they would be doing would be to help with that, correct? As far as the DNR.
Correct. So the consultant that we hire are specialists in habitat restoration, both in the waterway and upland. And so we would look to their guidance to help us develop a concept of what that habitat improvement would look like. And then we would bring those concepts to the neighborhood association to talk about the pros and cons of what our consultant would recommend and what type of habitat are we trying to introduce to that area. And so I'm hopeful that, their input and their knowledge will help guide the discussion, because I think that was one of the biggest problems a few years ago was there really wasn't a consultant on board to guide that process. And so there was some differences of opinions of what that meant. I think there were some people who just wanted to remain exactly the way it is, and and if so, I guess there wasn't really any discussion about habitat as it relates to that. There were also some discussions about, well, should we be improving the habitat as part of this, and can we do it in a way that will limit erosion and take care of some other concerns? So I think there was a lot of concerns that were brought up, but no real detailed analysis on how to address the concerns on either party. Because there was a difference of opinion there. So I'm hopeful that this consultant will bring their expertise and knowledge forward and help guide that discussion and try to bring unity to the neighborhood to find a general consensus of the approach moving forward.
Okay, and I did want to point out, under community engagement and outreach, it says that staff will attend 2 open house events. So it looks like more than one.
I think that, yeah, and that could be, I might have had that incorrect.
Okay, thank you.
Motion.
Do we need a motion
To
to open the floor?
Motion to open the floor.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Mr. Morgan, would you like to speak again?
First of all, we were quite clear when we said we didn't think that habitat should be touched. And I get nervous when you start talking about habitat, because one of the reasons that this whole controversy came up, people from across the street were going into the park and cutting down trees. Now, it's natural habitat right now. It's the last green space in the city of Green Bay along the bay shore. There are a lot of animals in there, foxes, birds, skunks, possum, eagles nest up in the trees. So what are you talking about when you say, well, we want to improve the natural habitat? The natural habitat is exactly what it is right now. It doesn't need any improvement. You want to go and shore up the shoreline? Go ahead. You want to put a trail in there? I don't know how you would do it because it's such a slope. I don't know how that would happen. But if you're really concerned about natural habitat for the animals that are there, and this is the last green space, leave it alone. People go in there and park and they go fishing. They're quite happy doing that. In the wintertime, that parking lot is filled up from people that walk out and ice fish. But I don't think you need any improvement. And whatever improvement you make is not going to help the birds, the foxes, the possums, the skunks. I would leave it alone, but that's just my thought. And we were quite clear on that when we went to the city council years ago. We were very clear on that. So please don't say I'm not sure. I can tell you. That's it. Thank you.
Thank
Alder
you.
Steuer
Thank
has
you,
a
Chair.
question?
Yeah, Mr. Morgan, I have a question for you, Alder Steuer here. I think one of the things we just talked about as far as improvements, and I think anytime you say the word improvements, sometimes there's a red flag, like, uh-oh, what are we gonna do here? I think what Director Ditchite was talking about a little bit was the removal of invasive species for one. I think that was one of the main points. And, you know, if those things choke out a lot of good vegetation, you know, it's happened at the wildlife sanctuary. What is your take on that? Do you feel that, you said just leave it alone. My feeling is if you left it alone, a lot of these invasive species would kind of come in and take over. So isn't that an issue that you would think would be, should be handled?
I have no problem removing invasive species. I understand that.
Okay.
And I think there's a group doing that already. And that was the instruction when we got the agreement from the city council that, I forget the name of the park director, that she would eventually remove the invasive species. But what would we be against is taking out all of that habitat, replanting new habitat, making it, I don't know, look like some kind of a park. Natural is natural.
So I just remember being on council back then, and one of the big issues was were folks cutting trees, trimming, doing whatever, so they could have a better view maybe of the bay. I don't know, all the different reasons they did it. In your estimation, is it better now, as far as people not going in and actually doing that type of thing anymore?
We went to the park department back then, and I believe the city attorney sent these people a letter telling them to cease and desist from going into the park and cutting any more trees, and they have stopped.
Okay, all right. Thank you, that's all I have.
I have a motion to close the floor. Any other questions?
Wait, we have to motion and second.
I don't know. Motion to
Oh.
close the floor.
Okay, second. Sorry, I thought you were moving
I know.
on.
Sorry.
Aye.
All those in favor say aye.
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 So do we have a motion? Oh,
Okay.
any other conversation?
I just wanted to make a point, and I understand his concerns, for sure. But from what I know of the Department of Natural Resources, I'd say that they would have the same exact concerns, and they wouldn't do something that would come in and damage the habitat for the wildlife. They would want to do it to improve the habitat for the wildlife. I'm confident in that, just based on what I know about the Department of Natural Resources.
And the application to the EPA was very clear that that's the desire of the grant funding, is to improve the habitat. What that means, we'll figure out when we get a consultant on board, and they can guide us in developing what that plan of action is going to be.
Well,
I think we've discussed this pretty in-depth, learned a lot about the process and how this is going to move forward. Do I have a motion to accept Robert E. Lee and Associates for hiring to complete the necessary engineering on the restoration of Joliet Park?
so moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 All right. Number 3, consideration with possible action on accepting the donation of the installation on all-inclusive playground at Bay Beach Amusement Park from Friends of Bay Beach.
So, yeah, I put together a packet of information which I included in the agenda packet. You'll see in there a 3D rendering of what that playground will conceptually look like. The layout may change a little bit, the look of the pavement surface might change a little bit, but in general, it would be the same equipment that would be purchased and installed. So the Friends of Bay Beach approached the city about a year or two ago with the thought of fundraising for an all-inclusive playground to install at Bay Beach Amusement Park. We felt that if that were going to be installed in any park, that is probably the best park to put it at because of the large amount of tourism at that park. It is a regional draw, and this will be a pretty significantly sized playground structure. So we've been working with them, especially over the last few months, and selecting what that equipment would look like, and selecting equipment that really is truly all-inclusive to as many people as possible. So what we're looking at is a playground that would cater to individuals who need assistance with cognitive skills, sensory skills, social emotional skills, and motor skills. So we're kind of looking at all of those things and picking out the most suitable playground equipment possible to cover that and really build a playground that truly is all-inclusive. And then in addition to that, the desire is to do a rubberized playground surface. So right now, almost all of our playgrounds in the city are wood chip playgrounds, which officially are ADA accessible, but the reality of it is somebody in a wheelchair or who is mobilely impaired has difficulty going onto a playground like that. So what we'd like to do is a rubberized surface on the entire playground structure. And so the Friends of Bay Beach have secured enough funding through donors to actually move ahead with this project. So that's what we're bringing forward. Just a couple of things I want to highlight as far as the design goes. So the playground is kind of broken into several areas. So we have a tot area, we have a larger children's area, we have various serenity seating areas for somebody who just wants a nice quiet place to rest. They can do that there. We have other sensory equipment in there, such as music equipment, where you can tap on a xylophone or, bang on a drum. That's all in there. In addition, we have a swing set that has connection swings, where adults and children can swing together in unison on the same swing. So they can look at each other, interact face to face as they're swinging. And then, finally, we have a zip line. So we have 3 zip lines in there. One of those zip lines is going to have a seat on it so that somebody who might be impaired and can't sit on the little pod seat, they'll have a more formal seat to sit on. So really the desire is to make this as inclusive to as many children as possible. We talked a lot about location, where this would go at Bay Beach Amusement Park. As a staff and the Friends of Bay Beach, we all feel the best location for this on site is the far west end, west of the Zip and Pippin. And the reason for that is several reasons. So one is there's a large parking lot right there that is underutilized. And that whole portion of the site is underutilized. So this would give people a reason to park in that parking lot, play on this playground, without it affecting the other usage of the park with all of the other activity. In addition, like I mentioned, there might be individuals who just need a little more peace and quiet, and the high activity zone of that, of the ride area just might be too much for that individual. So this is a more quiet area of the park. And then finally, there's a desire to turn that whole open space grass area into a picnic area. So we hope to do that shortly thereafter. The playground goes in, is put in, we'd like to put in restrooms there. we'd like to put in various open shelters so that people could rent those open shelters and actually picnic over there on that portion of the park. We have plans to even continue the train track out past the Zip and Pippin and maybe bring it closer and have another depot location right by this all-inclusive playground. So those other amenities aren't being necessarily done as part of this playground donation, but we're looking at that in the very near future. If we're gonna put the playground location, there's other amenities that we wanna add out there. And we'll look for funding those other amenities at a later date. But in general, the Friends of Bay Beach is really excited about this playground. Bay Beach staff and the Parks Department is really excited about this playground. Unfortunately, the Friends of Bay Beach couldn't be at this meeting today, but they would love it if you would approve this and accept the donation of this playground.
Sure.
Any other questions?
I do. So does he.
No, either one.
Alderette?
Okay, couple things. So, looking at the map, there's the parking lot and then the whole rubberized area. Would there be like a rubberized area to get to this area, or, you know, a path that would allow them to get there?
So in addition to the playground, I didn't include an official site map of how the playground would fit onto the site because we
Okay.
don't have that quite developed yet. We're in the process of designing that. But one thing that the Friends of Bay Beach will also fund as part of this is the walkway connections to the paved parking lot and also likely from that gravel parking lot. So we'll have two paved walkways from both parking lots going directly into this playground. In addition, the other thing that they're going to fund and install would be the required stormwater management in order to develop this playground. So anytime you develop anything in the city per ordinance, you have to do stormwater management for it. So we're in the process already of engineering that stormwater management. That will likely be a little biofilter in between the gravel parking lot and the roadway. So it's not going to be built out into the parkway. That biofilter will be right along the road edge. But those are the two things that they'll fund and install in addition to the playground.
Okay, and then, I mean, it sounds like you're coming up with additional ideas to improve that area, but does this particular proposed playground go with what you had, you originally planned for that area?
Originally in that planned area was a picnic area, and that's all it was. It was kind of several smaller rental shelters along with a large corporate rental facility with restrooms. This really fits in well with the idea of it being a picnic area. It doesn't stray from it. What it does is it just eats up some of that open space, so maybe we can't fit quite as many open shelters as we had imagined. But what it does do, and it does quite effectively and well, is it gives people another reason to want to picnic in that area versus picnic at our other shelters or right next to the rides. If we have this all-inclusive playground that's right next to their picnic shelter, we feel that those shelters are actually going to get rented more often than if that playground wasn't there to begin with.
So you're talking shelters, not just picnic tables, but shelters?
Over time, yeah. I mean,
Okay.
we don't have the funding in place to build picnic shelters at this point, but that was always in the master plan and the vision for that space.
Okay, and I know there used to be soccer fields over there because my kids played soccer there. So I don't
Yeah,
know
there
why
were-
those went away, but,
Those soccer fields were there before the master plan was completed. Once the master plan was done, the soccer fields went away.
okay, and I don't see it on here, the cost.
The cost is projected at $1.3 million.
Okay, or was it in here and I missed it?
No, it's actually in the next item
Oh,
on
okay.
the agenda, which is the construction and the developers, the design, construction, and dedication agreement. That number
Okay.
is listed in there and in the fine details of that.
Thank you, I'm sorry, I kind of
So
getting ahead
it's-
of it, okay.
So the playground and the rubberized surfacing is approximately $1 million, and then about $300,000 in site work and preparation to install the playground.
Okay, thank you.
Alder Steuer?
Thank you, Chair. Director, Okay, I kind of know the answer to this somewhat, but when you say all-inclusive, that means for folks that could need help, special needs, anybody, old, young? Okay. So with that playground surface, I know the Friends of Bay Beach are footing that bill. The city, there will be no monies that the city has to put out for this?
Not for the installation of the playground. The city will have to do ongoing maintenance because, once it's officially built and donated to the city, it becomes just like any other city facility where we have to maintain it. I will say that, rubberized surfacing typically lasts about 10 years. So maybe 10 years from now, we might have to look at resurfacing that. But the nice thing about this location versus a traditional park location is we have a funding source. Bay Beach Amusement Park will fund the resurfacing costs if the Friends don't 10 years from now. Typically, playgrounds last 20 to 30 years. So this will be here for a long period of time. And yes, there is maintenance involved, but it's no more maintenance than a traditional playground. Even with the rubberized surfacing, which might be a little more maintenance than other surfacing, you still have a lot of maintenance just bringing in wood chips and replenishing those on any given year too. There's a cost associated with that, which we won't have to do
Right.
here.
Well, do you see this as being the wave of the future somewhat with that playground material? I know the city doesn't have a whole lot of playgrounds like that right now, but do you see that being kind of the wave of the future maybe as far as development of
That's
playgrounds?
definitely, yeah, for all playgrounds, it would be desired and preferred to do a rubberized surfacing on every single playground. The reason we don't is we just don't have enough money to
Right,
do
I
that.
understand.
It's a significant cost to do that rubberized surfacing. But if you're really trying to do an all-inclusive playground, you can't really build one without
Without
it.
it, okay. And has there been any look at GSI types technologies, engineering at all as for drainage, that type of thing? Would that be included at all?
Well, that's part of that stormwater management, so it's not
Okay.
necessarily inventive technology, but we are doing stormwater management as part of this.
Okay. That's all.
I'd just like to make some comments here, and then Alder Eck would like to comment also. So I think this is a really good idea for Bay Beach. I know when families head there, it's a busy day and it's exciting and everything like that. And, I think this is a nice little area where people can just go to take a little rest for the parents and sit down and honestly, it's safety-wise, keep an eye on their kids a little bit tighter in a more not-so-busy area. I think that's important that the park doesn't have. I think that'll give a good break or a chance to get away and get out of the noise and the excitement and be able to rest a little bit. So I think that's important. I surely want to see the gravel parking lot next to the area. I think it's very important. I think the sidewalk will achieve that temporarily, but sooner or later, if you're talking wheelchairs and unloading and things like that, I think that's something in the future that needs to happen soon. And the other end of it is, as much as we try to keep the prices down on the rides here, I think this is still an opportunity for people to take their kids to Bay Beach without the financial part of it, and maybe not so much, you know what I mean? It just gives it another added feature. I like that idea. Alder?
And we are not intending on charging a ticket for this. It'll still be open and accessible to the public, free of charge.
Okay, so the cost is 1.3, but the donation is not, it's not listed under number 3 as accepting the donation, the amount. So would it be the
So-
1.3, or is it,
So, and that kind of leads into the fourth item also, but real briefly, so the Friends of Bay Beach are not planning on giving the city a donation of 1.3 million. What they would like to do is purchase the playground themselves and hire their own contractors to install the playground. And so
Okay.
that's very similar to what other projects we've done with them and other donor groups before. And that's the process that they want to go through for this project also.
So it's just basically, we're approving them donating whatever the cost of this particular, or all these things.
We are not accepting the value of the playground. What we're accepting is the playground itself.
Okay, all right, just wanted to clarify.
I'll make a
Thank you.
motion. If you,
Go ahead.
Are we ready to
Yeah.
take a vote, make a
Yeah.
motion on this?
I'd make a motion to accept the donation for the installation of an all-inclusive playground by the
Second.
Friends of Bay Beach.
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. Nice work.
I don't have to go through.
Number
too much
4,
before.
consideration with possible action on the approval of the design, construction, and dedication agreement with Friends of Bay Beach for the installation on all-inclusive playground at Bay Beach Amusement Park.
I make a motion to approve.
Yeah, but what I would do is if you're going to, that's what I'm looking for a motion.
Well, I figured
but
we kind of
do-
talked about it in
Yeah,
three.
I do
so-
have one other just
Okay.
item. I'm wondering if you could also make it contingent. So approve it contingent upon the law department review and approval of the agreement. They've started their approval process or their review process, but they're not 100% complete, so they might tweak it. There might be a little bit of language modifications moving forward. By adding that contingency in there, it gives them a little bit of flexibility to make some minor changes to that agreement.
Okay, so if I say so moved, then you know what that means?
Yep.
Okay, I'll say that.
I'll second that.
All those in favor, then, say aye.
Aye.
All right, that passes. Number 5, consideration with possible action on approving the installation of 23 Wisconsin Public Service ornamental light poles and fixtures along the East River Trail section from Webster Avenue to Main Street for a total cost of $75,801.83. Seth?
So recently, the city constructed a section of the East River Trail from Webster Avenue to Main Street roughly and built a canoe kayak launch. The project is not 100% complete yet. There's still a few punch list items for the contractor to finish up, but it's nearing completion. One thing we have not done yet is installed any safety or security lighting along that trail section. Typically what we do is we usually do those type of lighting systems with Wisconsin Public Service. The reason we do that are kind of from a cost standpoint. So typically there's an upfront cost to actually install the poles and fixtures. But usually that upfront cost is much cheaper than if the city were to buy their own poles and fixtures and hire a contractor to install them and bury ground wires. So we can do the upfront initial cost much cheaper. And then the downfall, which isn't really much of a downfall, but there is a downfall in the fact that in essence, you're renting each light pole or leasing it from Wisconsin Public Service. And for each light pole and fixture that you install, you're roughly paying them about $21 a month per pole. So if you approve purchasing this and installing these light poles and fixtures, it would add about $6,000 roughly, a little bit more to our annual budget, which is our electricity budget in our parks. There is already enough money in our budget. We usually budget a little bit high on that because we're not sure what the rates are going to be and really what our energy use is going to be on any given year. So there's usually a little bit of a buffer in there from year to year in our budget. We feel that we have enough in there already built into our 2024 budget without having to increase our electrical budget to accommodate this roughly $6,000 annual expense. Now, we've done this in many other locations in our park, especially along the East River Trail. So if you go behind, other examples you can look at is Seymour Park has this type of lighting system. The Porlier Pier has this type of lighting system. We have this lighting system behind Riverside Ballroom and other areas of the East River Trail. You'll see it behind East High School. So, you know, this is a system that we've done before. What's nice about it is this is a portion of the East River Trail, so this lighting will match other lighting along the East River Trail that we've already installed. And then we're committing to a 20-year commitment on these poles and fixtures. After 20 years of paying the $6,000 a year, we can so choose to take the lights down at that point. Now, if we were to go a different route, like I said, we could buy the poles ourselves and install them ourselves. Our utility costs would be much cheaper per year because you're only paying how much electricity you use, but our upfront costs would be significantly higher. And we do not have enough money available currently in our budget for that project to purchase and install lights on our own. So if we want lighting along that entire trail section, which as a Parks Department we would recommend, because we have, it's kind of tucked behind residential, and we also have that one, can't remember, is that the Freedom House? Or
Golden.
Golden House is right there too. So there's, really a desire to light that trail up because it's behind the Golden House. There is currently enough money in our budget as it stands for that project that we don't need any additional funding for you to approve this today.
But, just a question before, and then you guys. Isn't that trail across the river though, East River?
The trail is along the East River on the north side from Webster to roughly, almost to Main Street. It's really kind of to St. George Street. We just built that trail section. It's not officially open to the public
Oh.
yet.
Under.
And it's right behind the Golden House.
Okay. Alder Steuer.
I just had a quick question. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks.
I was wondering, those lights, was there something in here I didn't quite see how much each light pole costs?
I don't have it broken out. Ultimately, there's two contracts that we would have to approve, which are in the agenda packet. One is roughly for $68,000 and the other one is roughly for $7,000. We would have to sign both of those contracts. And then what we would be getting out of that is 23 light poles and fixtures. There is a map that I included in the agenda packet showing the location where all those poles would go.
And I see that. I just was, apples and oranges, whatever. I just was trying to compare what it would cost if we did it.
So if the cost is roughly
Versus what?
$75,000 and it's 23,000,
you divide
or it's
it up.
23 poles, it's
Okay.
roughly $3,000 a pole.
Okay. I
For
just needed
installation
to
costs.
hear that. Okay, I'm good.
Nice.
Alder Eck.
Okay, and it kind of goes along with what you're getting at. So, and from a math standpoint, so based on a 20-year commitment, it's a better way to go with the public service putting it and us just paying the $6,000 more a year.
Correct. If we do it any other way, we don't have enough funding to proceed with at least that many light poles. We could look at putting up a handful of lights, but the entire trail would not be lit. You'd have a lot of dark areas along the trail section.
Part of
Yeah,
this.
so it's right behind the Golden House, so, and I know they probably have a security fence and things like that, but obviously there's a reason why there should be more security, and so is there concern about that path going behind there? I'm assuming they were okay with that.
Yeah, we've had many discussions with them throughout the years. This path alignment was proposed, if I were to guess, maybe 8 years ago. And so they've known about this trail for that number of years. They're actually rebuilding their facility as we speak.
Yeah, it's huge.
And they're going to be installing a fence separating their property from the trail so that their residents can have a private secured area behind their building. So that's already going to be in the works. But their primary concern was making sure it was adequately lit. The spacing of this lighting is no different than the spacing that we do along other sections of the trail. So over by Riverside Ballroom, behind East High School, it's the exact same spacing between the poles. And so this lighting would be very similar to other sections of the trail. It's
Okay,
nothing
thank you.
unique.
walking bike trail too, though, right? I mean,
It's a walking and
same-
bicycle
Well,
trail.
it says walking, I get it. Actually, update, they were actually installing the fence while I came here today.
Oh, okay.
White plastic, so it looks like it's gonna be 6 foot high, so they're not even gonna be able to see that trail.
Which is a good thing because it's supposed to be secure.
Okay. All their
I
story.
have one other question. So WPS, let's face it, they would like to make money, so I'm just wondering with the monies that they're spending on this, is this, I'm trying to put it nicely, is there partly a feel-good project for them doing this, or are they making their share of profit from it as well because it's WPS?
I mean, all I can accurately tell you is that this is a program that they offer to all municipalities within their region. I know that other municipalities do this also. It's really no different than when we do a security light in our parks. You see, in a lot of our parks, you'll see a wood pole with like a Cobra head fixture. That's a WPS rental light. We pay them an upfront cost to install that pole, and then we pay them about $20 a month to light that park. So we
Right.
have this security lighting in almost every single park that we own. This is a little more extensive and it's a little more ornamental, but that's just because of the large number of people that are going to be using it. But we do this ornamental lighting in other park locations. Like I said, St. James has ornamental lighting, Seymour Park has
Right.
it.
Harlan?
I'm good with that. Because they've done it in other areas, so it's not like something new, that they've done it before. It's a tried and true thing, so I'm good with that. So,
Oh, I would make a motion, and 6 is pretty much, we do one, we gotta do the other, right? So, but I'll make a
Correct.
motion to approve 5.
We have a second to approve
I'll second.
the motion.
Yeah.
No, you can.
Huh?
You can go ahead.
Can I, please?
All those in favor say aye.
Aye. And go ahead, number 6.
Number 6, consideration with possible action on approving the utility easement with Wisconsin Public Service for the installation of the ornamental light poles and fixtures along the new northeastern Wisconsin East River Trail.
Yeah, so they.
East Side Green Trail section from Webster Avenue to Main Street.
So this is in conjunction with the other one, so they cannot install these light poles without us granting them a formal easement on the property where we want the light poles installed. The only thing I would recommend in this situation, again, is to make it contingent upon the law department review and approval of the contract. The contract that's in the agenda packet is pretty much their standard contract that we use for every project. But I'm just saying that because this contract came very late in the game, that's why it was part of the amended agenda. And the law department just hasn't had a chance to review that contract, so this gives them a chance to just take a second look at it before we actually sign it.
So moved.
Second motion. Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Information, director's report.
Yeah, I included the director's report in the agenda packet. I don't have any other information to add, other than Bay Beach Amusement Park is now closed for the season. Our last weekend was last weekend. It was a great year out there, and we're looking forward to next year. Other than that, we have the Haunted Halloween Hike coming up. That's our next big attraction that's coming up. It's already sold out. We only offered it to, I believe, 600 individuals. I think it sold out within a day or two. Yeah. It was like a lot of interest in that event, and that's also even if you're not signed up, and you can still go and walk the trails and see the event. It's a great event. You just won't be able to collect candy at the tables if you're not registered. So.
Well, that's okay.
I just wanted to check with forestry. It seems like, just from what I'm reading, that they're keeping up fairly well, because, for a while felt like they were under the gun a bit, trying to keep up with trees, cutting, the ash trees, as well as stumping. but in your estimation, then it's going pretty well?
It's going exactly how we envisioned it would with the amount of work that we can get done from year to year. A few years ago, when we talked about the Emerald Ash Borer, one thing that the council did was to approve 2 new arborists to our table of organization to help us achieve the goals of both removal of ash trees, stumping, pruning, and planting in a timely manner. We weren't sure if we'd be able to keep up with it a few years ago until the council approved those 2 new positions. So that's been very helpful.
Great. No?
I have a question.
Alder Eck.
Thank you. Last time I had asked about the Porlier Pier, and just wondered what the status is on that.
So where we're at right now is we are looking at hiring a consultant to develop a plan for reimagining that pier and rebuilding it into something else. So if you recall, in our discussions with the neighborhood association, there was a strong desire both from the committee and the neighborhood to put something in its place, maybe not quite as big and as grand as what we have now. So that's where we sit with it. We still haven't removed the pier that was there. Part of the reason we haven't done that is our hope is that once we know what we want to build, we'd like to apply for grants to do that and help us fund the installation of something new. So although we have money set aside for the demolition, if we tie that money into construction in addition, we can use that funding as a match. If we spend the demolition money in advance to get the pier out of there, then we'd have to come up with additional money for any grant that we would apply for as a match to that grant. So that's kind of where we're looking at, what the approach we're taking right now. We still have that entry securely barricaded so the public can't get out onto the pier. And we're hoping that, maybe next year we can take that pier down after we apply for some grants and see where that discussion goes. But in any situation, we'll be talking about it at a future park committee meeting.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Dan, I only got a comment and a question, and I'd like to get everyone's feeling here. I think it was last Saturday, I don't remember. There was 100 people brawling in Farland Park. 100, they said, at least. I seen video of it. There's a lot of police there. They didn't arrest anybody. A little problem with some of that, but I understand. The same people that we work with in the park are some of these people that videoed it, and with the parking situation and that. After the budget meeting, I'm wondering if taking our time on this park is going to create more problems, then I'd like to implement into the budget enough money to go forward with finishing this park and not creating a bigger problem. I don't know how far it'll go in the budget meetings, but I'm voicing my concern that maybe I didn't have time to look into it yet with the police.
Homeless issue.
And then the homeless issue, and I think, since we're adding all this to the park, and if it keeps happening, and I know what happens down at Eastman Park a lot, and that's 2 parks now that, we gotta, if this is our jewel of our town, we gotta get the police force on, and we need to start patrolling these parks, and it's gonna be an issue, whether it's lighting, people in the area. We got to figure it out. If this is our jewel, then we better start watching it a little more carefully. And I don't think this is where, but I'd like to, if finishing it gets it done and brings more people to it and keeps the reason of an empty park, which I'm not seeing the other ones do too, but it's almost like the railroad tracks kind of add to the environment around the parks, It's just it's a rough one in the area. Now I got 2 parks and this stuff is happening, and it's starting to be very concerning, especially by those kind of numbers.
In relation to your timeline, so The Finance Committee is currently looking at our 2024 bond request. We do have the shortage of funding built into our 2024 request, and if that gets approved, then we would be able to maintain the schedule that we've always talked about, which was under construction in the spring or early summer of 2024. So,
And by the way, thank you for sending me the breakdown, I think you all got it, of the ARPA money that was divided out. We had so many times we shuffled that around.
I think a lot of us on council, I'm on the west side, but Farland Park has been an issue for a long time,
Yeah,
and we'd like to see it done well.
yeah. That's all I have.
Receive and place on file?
Uh,
Do we have a
Second.
motion to receive and place on file? Thank you for the assistance.
You said it, I'm seconding.
Scored.
Okay.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
I make a motion.
Next meeting.
The next meeting is, what,
October
getting
11th.
there? October 11th.
And I see Joe is still up there, so you can let him know we're gonna talk about it.
October 11th, and we'll be bringing everything that happened here today to council next week to get further approval on what we discussed tonight. Anybody that would like to be present at that meeting and voice their opinion, we would be more than happy to open up the floor and voice your comments to the whole city council, which is next Tuesday.
Is that October 3rd? Is that
That-
right?
Sounds great.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay,
motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned.
Okay. Good job.
Thanks for that. Thanks, Chris. Chris is buying the first one.